Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Area 312 Rock and Metal Vodcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kent, along with my co-host,
Rex.
Friends, today regarding our very special guest, along with his band Guardian. They've released 7 studio albums, 4 Spanish albums, a host of indie releases. He's also served as vice president of A&R with EMI's Forefront Records and also with Sony BMG's Reunion Records. As well, he served with John and Dino Elefante as label chief with 3.1 Productions, which also included his Selectric Records imprint. Friends, our very special guest today is none other than co-founder of Guardian and bassist for the band, Mr. David Bach. Welcome, David. It's an honor, sir.
Thank you. Oh, shucks. You got your facts straight. Wow, that was super impressive.
Yes,
impressive. I don't know what people know or don't know, but wow, man, you guys are organized.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, we try to do our research, but Rex and I have been fans for several years.
Wow.
Been carrying it with us for a while.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, we're going to start off with, you mentioned to me you're an open book, and David, that's a great segue. I want to start at the foremost bit of news and information.
Okay. That was good. You're good. You're good, man.
July the 30th of 2024, in the year of our Lord at 6 a.m. your time.
Wow, look at you go, man.
You announced a book deal primarily about Guardian. And first of all, congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Let's talk about this. Tell us.
Okay, awesome. Let's go. So basically, there is a publisher in Nashville. She's somebody I've known off and on for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Loosely. I mean, I don't see her often, but I knew that she was doing this. And she reached out to me about 5 years ago when I would get, and she and I are friends on Facebook. And I would occasionally post past Guardian memories. And she said, David, I like the way that you tell Guardian stories. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And I go, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe. So this is 5 years ago. And then recently I was posting a few more things about Guardian, and she and I just started talking, and she goes, my company has come along. What do you think about it? And I said, you know what? There's actually a new Guardian project in the work. This might be a good time, is basically what I told her. So again, it's brand new. In fact, we haven't even inked the final deal, but I feel confident saying it's going to happen. Now, again, is it going to be a big national book release? I don't think so, but it'll be kind of like an indie. She has a really cool boutique publishing house. Oh, but again, it's all brand new. So we're kind of here. We've kind of have a handshake deal, but I feel confident to say to anybody watching that it's going to happen.
That's wonderful. Now, I'm going to ask, and it might be too early. Do you have a working title?
Of course.
Can you?
Hey, well, it's funny. It's on my Facebook page. It's there. David Bach, Rollin' Rock. So the name of the book's going to be Rollin' Rock by David Bach.
There you go. I dig it, man. I dig it. So are we talking a 2025 release then?
Yeah. I gotta write the darn thing. So yeah. But my goal is to not drag it out. I'm in a good headspace now as far as writing. So I feel like it can be done. But yes, it won't be 2024 or 2025. That's the goal.
Sure. And good things come to those who not only wait, but those who take their time to make things happen. And I know that you're all about quality. Watching the smoke. put the cart ahead of the horse here for a minute, David. You mentioned something about a Guardian project in the works.
Right.
Is this something in relation with Rikk Hart and Paul Cawley?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. Let's go ahead and talk about that. Now,
Um,
we would have had you on eons ago. However, Rikk Hart, bless Rick, we love Rick. He was our second guest ever.
right,
Um,
right,
Paul Cawley blessed us with an
right.
episode. Our brother Jeremy
I've
Brown.
watched them both. I watch your guys' stuff. Yes, I've
Oh,
seen both.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jeremy Brown, our brother at Torrential Rift, and we love
Yeah, he's
Jeremy.
great. I love
He
Jeremy
beat
too.
us to the punch with you.
It's all good.
Yeah. So anyway, regarding tell us where we're at with Rick and
Right,
Paul. Is it going to be called Guardian or
right,
Fusion? Because I
right.
have
No,
thoughts.
and that's a great question. So I'll kind of jump in. So basically, what happened was, and I'll try not to sidebar off too much. I'm kind of the king of sidebar, so you got to pull me in. So about 2 years ago, I was getting ready. I'd lived in Nashville for the last 30 years, getting ready to move back home to California, which is where I grew up. And obviously, Paul and Rick are out here. Long story short, it was ironic because I was getting ready to move out here. And then I got an email from Rick saying, "Hey, man, because Rick and I would like talk occasionally." And he said, "Hey, man, Paul and I have been writing a bunch of music. Would you consider playing bass on it? We're kind of want to do something, anyway." And I said, "Sure." I said, interestingly enough, I'm going to be moving out to California. So anyway, so I moved out here, and this is April of 2022. So about 2.25 years ago, or whatever. But so I got out here, and I reached out to Rick, and he was living out in Palm Springs, and he said, "Hey, man, can you and Paul just come out to my house?" And keep on. I haven't seen these guys in person since 1990. And without going to anyway, when they left the band, I don't want to say there was hard feelings, but there was just a lot of unresolved things that we'd never talked about. So basically, I drove out to Rick's place in Palm Springs, and Paul was there, and we just sat for a while and just talked and just caught up and kind of squashed any old beefs, which were minor. And then we jammed a little bit, and they were playing me this thing. And so Paul had written this thing in true Paul Cawley style. The very earliest incarnation of Guardian was Fusion. And Paul never envisioned it being a trio. He always wanted another guitar player, but we had kind of had a revolving door of guys. So in the early days, it was Paul, Rick, and myself. We were called Fusion. We made that first Fusion. People call it an EP. It was a glorified demo tape called A Rockin' Victory, but it got us our record deal. So basically, Rick goes, "It's kind of like Fusion Rides Again." And I said, "Well, that sounds really cool. That sounds really cool." So I came out and we jammed a little bit, and Paul was explaining it. So he had written this whole kind of progressive rock opus about totally biblical, about the creation of the earth. I mean, this really kind of very cool, both on a biblical note and on a prog rock note, like fully indulgent prog rock. And then Rick wrote a lot of stuff too. Rick is actually a really good arranger, and he has an understanding of string arrangements and stuff. So they're sharing me their ideas, and I'm going, cool, yes, I'll do it. I just moved back here. I just gotten a remarried. I said, "Hey guys, my life is kind of in this thing, but yeah, let me know." So we talked, and it was good. And then radio silence. I didn't hear from those guys for about a year. Well, it's been more than a year now. We would talk occasionally, and they said, "Hey, it's still going on." But then I had not heard from them in a year until last month. Paul called me and said, "Hey, man, it's still on. Rick and I have finally got all these tracks together. Are you ready to play some bass?" So I said, "Sure." And so I've cut bass so far on 2 songs. This is very interesting. This is crazy. It's going to be a 3-record set. It's going to be this triple magnum opus, whatever. But the first record, we're going to release it 1 record at a time. I've cut bass on 2 songs. I'm really blown away at what these guys have written. And that's where it's at right now. really this is fusion. There's really three core incarnations of Guardian. There was the original fusion, which was Paul, Rick, and myself, and a myriad of other guys. And then Tony Palacios joined our band, and that was kind of that first watch era Guardian. And then as people know, Paul and Rick left in 1990. Carl Ney joined first. We'd known Carl for Carl used to come see us in the early incarnation. He even saw us in the Armor. And so Carl joined first, and then we got Jamie Rowe. And that lineup of Guardian, Jamie, Tony, Carl, and myself, that to me will always be the core Guardian lineup.
Sure.
But First Watch, that was a great lineup. And then, of course, Fusion. So this is kind of Fusion Rides Again. So to answer your question, we're going to call this project Guardian 1. 2 words, Guardian and 1. We talked about doing Fusion, but we thought, so anyway, that's where it sits right now.
So go ahead, Rex. My hands are up.
Well, and I'm not sure you can or are willing to say, David, what about the guitar player for the project?
Well, people don't know this. Paul Cawley's an incredible guitar player.
Oh, okay.
Now, again, he's not a shredder like Tony Palacios, which is why Paul's vision for the band. And to be clear, Paul is the founder of Guardian. Now, he got me early, and as soon as I got in, having 2 people, it kicked off and stuff. So I am the co-founder, but Paul had the vision for the band early on, and he always saw it as him being the lead singer, rhythm guitar player, occasional lead, but having another lead guitar player. In fact, Paul's original band, when Paul and I first met, he was in a band called Debut, and I was in a band called No Surprise. And we were like Orange County bands in Orange County, California, kind of rival bands, but friendly. You know what I'm saying? And they had a guitar player named Mike Abbott. They were a great band because Mike Abbott was a great lead guitar player, great singer. Paul could sing and play guitar. So they kind of so he really wanted that kind of thing. But we had all these great guitar players, but they would just it just didn't work out. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah.
So, David, because I really put the cart ahead of the horse, but that's okay.
No, go for it, man. I love it.
So you see that logo right there?
I do.
That is iconic.
That's and there's a funny story behind it.
So, as a fan, permit me to say this as a fan, and you can veto me or whatever you and Paul
go for it, man.
This has only been used for this album,
right, for that album and for that tour. Yes,
this is so iconic. Like this is a tattoo. And as much as I love Guardian, and I'm telling you, I love Guardian. Okay, so I've got all the studio releases, from the. I think Guardian 1 is perfect. Not that my opinion matters, but
sure it does.
I was praying that you all would put Guardian in there. Now, here's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
This is so iconic, and it's only been used for this album and the First Watch tour.
Right.
Not to diminish the cross at all, but you see that cross in there? What if that was a number 1 instead of a cross?
It's a great idea. So we were called Fusion when Wes Hine from Enigma Records came down to our little rehearsal shack in Santa Ana and signed us. He said, "Hey, I really like the band, but you guys, you need to change your name. There's some Spanish jazz rock Fusion." And Fusion was a great name because, when Paul and I, we kind of came up with that together. Fusion, being infused with the spirit, Paul's concept, of the armor, Ephesians 6:10, but put on the full armor of God. So it all kind of worked, but Wes goes, Yeah, come up with a new name. So we labored and labored and labored and labored, and we came up with Guardian. But then at the time, with the whole Striper thing and all the sevens and stuff, we spelled it. We dropped the U, so we spelled it Gardin. So it had seven letters. So there's a lot of T-shirts and stuff that was Guardian. And then when Tony joined the band, it's great. I love him. He just said, you know what, that's cool, but that's stupid. Like, let's get the U back in there. And so it's ironic when and we've been signed with Enigma and stuff. And then there was this guy who did our first photo shoot for the first Watts record. Anyway, somehow, and he wasn't even a Christian. He goes, man, I got this idea. I'm looking at your name. What if you put a cross in the U? And we were just going, oh, that's really cool. That works on a lot of different levels. So that's how that came about. So yeah, so we're trying to figure it out now because obviously it's 2 words. It's Guardian 1. Now maybe we'll do stuff with the number 1 and all that. So it's a great idea. It's a great idea. So we'll cut you in. We'll give you like a little taste of the action. So no, but it's a great idea. So we're still figuring all that out. Like, what's it going to be? And for people who are wondering, the armor is going to make a resurgence. Now, it's not going to be the armor like it was back then, because back
Power
then
Rangers.
and you know what? We were Power Rangers before Power Rangers.
I know.
Paul had that vision, and his brother Reggie. We bought motocross armor, and his brother Reggie just slaved trying to make it work. So, but now it's just Paul, Rick, and myself. So we're going to do something, but obviously it's going to be 2025. I think Reggie still has a few pieces of the armor, but we're going to try and modernize it. So anyway, yeah, so it's going to be Guardian 1. I think the first record, Volume 1, is going to be called In the Beginning. And it's very interesting because, Paul wrote this thing. It's kind of about, creation, and, it's kind of like a progressive rock thing. Like it's a story everybody knows, but, and there's a lot of cool themes that Paul is exploring, like, the battle of the angels in heaven when Lucifer was thrown out of heaven, which lends itself so well to heavy music. Mm-hmm. So, but it's interesting. I don't want to hype it too much, but when the guys sent me this stuff, I was blown away in that it was kind of like, it's not just heavy. Oh, there's some heavy stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that's kind of very symphonic soundtrack. I mean, again, I grew up listening to, Yes, and Genesis and all the great 70s prog rock and Pink Floyd. So there's a lot of that in there. So it's not just heavy. It's not like, for example, Jamie Rose, new project. Oh, Calamity Kills. It's insane. It's an insane project. It's great, but it's not all heavy like that. So it's a little bit more. Anyway, all right. Sorry.
No,
dude, I'm never at a loss for words. So you gotta rein me in.
Well, Rex and I are both fans of progressive bands as well, so it really sounds appealing.
I think you guys are going to dig this. I think you're going to dig it. And
I'm pleased to hear. I just hope that it's, because I think when we talked to Rick, that was like 2 years ago now.
Right.
No, that was season 1, and we're in season 4 now. But we had a chance to talk to. I'm just happy to hear it's still going, and so it is still going.
You guys did a 2-part interview with Rick, didn't you? Yeah, I watched them both. Yes. It's great. No,
thank you.
And again, it's moved along at that point. What's interesting is that none of us, like, Tony Palacios is an incredible audio engineer.
Sure.
Paul, Rick, and myself are not. They started recording this in GarageBand, which is a piece of Apple software. And I use it. It's a good kind of a demo thing. It's kind of the little brother of Apple's flagship music software, Logic. So we're doing this in GarageBand, but you can do stuff in GarageBand. You can. But when I heard it, I was going, "Oh, this is really cool. Mm-hmm. This is really cool." But yeah, a lot of it is super prog. Like the first thing I did, the opening song, it's like an 8-minute song. Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm so ADD. I go, guys, this song is like, it's a kind of a snooze fest, but it's really not. It's kind of like a soundtrack. Rick's are really into soundtracks and symphonic. So there's a method to the madness, but it's very indulgent prog rock.
It couldn't be any snoozier than Tales from Topographic Oceans by
You know
Yes.
what? Thank you, brother. And I love that record. But yeah, that back then and so we're talking about, and I'm getting ahead of myself. So it's going to be released one volume at a time. Our plan is, once, Lord willing, all three records come out, we'll do a triple vinyl release, with the big gatefold,
Sure.
kind of like what those bands used to do. But right now, I loved it because at first when Paul was telling me this, I'm going, because I'm very pragmatic. Paul's going, it's going to be a triple record and stuff. And I'm going, oh man, dude, that just sounds like a lot. But then when I heard they'd go, no, we're going to do one record at a time. And I'm going, okay, good. Because at first I was going, oh man, this just sounds a little too lofty. I mean, it's very ambitious and it's cool, but it's a lot.
Well, may we not forget that the greatest garage recording in rock and roll history is Boston's eponymous album.
I know. You guys know your stuff.
Good things come out of the garage.
It's amazing. And quick sidebar, and you guys probably know this. My good friend, Tracy Ferry, incredible bass player. Tracy, I've actually known Tracy back when Guardian was just coming up and getting some. He played in a band in Hollywood called Electric. Really cool, as part of the whole Sanctuary LA scene. Anyway, so he and I got to be friends. I know his wife, Mary Beth, and stuff. Ironically, when I left Guardian in about 98, Tracy took my place. Tracy joined Guardian for about 6 months, and then he got an offer to play with Rebecca St. James and stuff. And it was more money, and he had a family. But it's funny because Tracy went on to play with Boston. I mean, technically, he's Boston's bass player now. So yes, that's an amazing story. That Boston story that Tom Scholz had that record done in his basement. And ironically, every record company passed on it. That's what's so amazing. And it's this amazing, pristine piece of work that has probably never been topped.
Man.
Anyway.
David, let's go back to the start then. We've loved you for years. I mean, this album right here, and I love all the other albums too, but
right.
This, along with Mass's Voices in the Night and Mastodon's It's a Jungle Out There, you guys were one of three albums that were my soundtrack in my summer of '89.
Wow.
David, what drew you to music? Was there music in your home, whether from the radio or maybe you had family members?
Great question. So, technically, nobody in my family was musical. And there is no history of musicians in my family, but my mom was kind of an actress and a showgirl before she married. My father was a career military officer. So he came from a long kind of line of that, and he was a very structured and organized man. So he wasn't a musician, but he was a lover of the arts. Like when I was a little kid, he loved Dixieland and jazz. When I was a little kid, I used to hear this stuff. He had this old Telefunken tube hi-fi that he brought back from the war. And I remember hearing him play music, and it was interesting. And my mom was kind of like a showgirl, singer and dancer. So they were not musicians, but I grew up around music. And I was the youngest of four kids. I was kind of a surprise. My mom was 41 when she had me, and when I was born, they passed away. two older twin brothers. They were 19 when I was born. My sister was 14 when I was born. And what was awesome about that is that from my earliest memories, my brothers were like really into like R&B and stuff like that. They were like ladies' men and dancing and stuff. And my sister fell in love with the Beatles. And I know this is a cliched story, but we were living in Washington, DC, Arlington, Virginia. My dad was at the Pentagon. I was like 3 years old. She sat me in front of the TV and had me watch the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I can remember it. And it's funny, and this is gonna be transparent here. I remember seeing the girls go nuts in the audience and my sister going nuts. And I'm a little kid going, there's something here. Like I didn't know what all that meant, but I was going, there's something. And I loved music. So I got into music, she would buy me records. She bought me Sergeant Pepper's. I was really into the Monkees, bought all that kind of stuff. So I kind of came up loving music. Didn't really start playing. My dad retired from the military and we moved to California, which is where my parents are both from. I come from this long line of deep California, like 7 generations on both sides. So it's kind of cool. And that's why it's so good to be home. So sorry, I'm processing here. So basically, I loved music. We settled in California. The neighborhood my parents settled, there was a bunch of kids my age. There was this one kid down the street. There were actually 3 Davids on my street. And this one David, he and I we're like first and second grade. We would play air guitar every day after school to the Monkees records. And we had like a cheap toy drum set and a cheap toy guitar. He generally wanted to be Mickey Dolenz, and I wanted to be, Davy Jones and stuff. So we would do that and we would play, and it was just so much fun. And I wanted to play music. I wanted to have a guitar. My parents, in their wisdom, though I hated it at the time, they bought a piano and they made me take piano lessons. So I'm in second grade taking piano. And a second grade boy, there was a bunch of little boys in the street. And I wanted to go out. We were out playing baseball and kick the can and all that. But there was this nice little old lady down the street, Olivia Robertson, God bless her, wonderful Christian woman. She was kind of the local piano teacher. So anyway, they got me piano lessons. They got me going. It was very hard for me because I'm ADD. So reading music and stuff was like really hard. But I started playing piano and I liked it. But it was like I wanted to go out and play with my friends. So anyway, loving music all this time, going through grade school, always dreaming about, I want to be in a band. I want to play in a band. I want to do this. And then when I got into 5th and 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I started to play saxophone in the school band. My folks had pulled me out of public school and put me in a small Seventh-day Adventist school in Garden Grove, California. And that was cool because it was a small school. My mom, who was an orphan, had a good experience with the Adventist. They kind of scholarshiped her. She went to Adventist school. And so I went there. I started playing saxophone. Obviously, loved music, was way into music. And then when I was about a freshman in high school, there were a bunch of guys who were sophomores who kind of had like a little school band together, had a little band together. There was a drummer and a bass player and stuff like that. And obviously I wanted to play with them so bad, but I didn't have an instrument. I didn't have anything. And, and the one guy, the main guy, the lead guitar player, Willie Kang, thank you, Willie. He kind of taught me how to play. He said, hey man, if you can get a guitar, I'll show you a few things and stuff, and you can play rhythm guitar in the band and stuff like that. So my dad let me trade in my saxophone for a very basic electric guitar, and I started to play, and Willie started to show me stuff, and they let me jam with him. They didn't let me officially join, but we would jam in his garage, and he said, and then here's the actual turning point. They had a bass player, a guy named Odine Donahue, good bass player, but he was not really into it. He was a jock. He could play bass and stuff like that, but they started to have problems. He didn't want to play. Anyway, Willie goes, dude, nobody plays bass. If you'll consider playing bass, dude, you can be in the band. And because back then it seemed like everybody, this is Southern California in the late 70s, either guitar or drums. So anyway, I didn't have a bass, and this is a funny story. So we went to this Adventist school. So and the school had a bass guitar. It was like this, just this very cheap Japanese copy of a Fender Jazz bass, and it was kind of like the school band's bass. So we creatively would figure out a way to every weekend we would go to the band room on Friday, and Mr. Bear, the band teacher, God bless him, I think he knew what was going on. We would borrow the bass every weekend and we would go jam so I could play the bass. And we didn't have a bass amp. Somebody had like this PA, but I could put the bass through it. And the first time we like plugged it in and I had that low end, like a boo, 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 and I went, okay, I get it. No, and not only do I get it, I want to play bass. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So started kicking around in bands all around Southern California. In fact, Guardian was like the 17th band I was ever in. A lot of just pickup bands. I'd play with whoever. Guys from my school, Orangewood Academy, which was this private school, Seventh-day Adventist school in Garden Grove, California. Played there and it was that time in Southern California when there was so many bands going on, and it was not hard to get in a band, and especially as a bass player, because nobody played bass.
So, David, I'm going to lead up to a point where you and Paul meet, and I believe that was circa 1982. But I'd like to ask you first,
brother. You've got your act together, man.
Well, I'd like to ask because
Sure.
There you are playing music and doing your thing, and
Right.
Learning to work the saxophone like Deacon Blue from Steely Dan, and
which is funny because in the school band I played the alto sax, and I've got one in the closet, and I want to break it out and play it again at some point. So we'll see. Anyway, sidebar.
No, it's awesome. So, and I was thinking about your, digging the R&B and stuff from your brothers, and I'm thinking about the Spinners, who I absolutely.
Oh my gosh, the Spinner,
Rubber Band Man,
the Spinners, and the OJs,
yes,
and I'm drawing. There was a bunch of those bands. Yes, I love all
good
that
stuff. But I got to ask you, David, because you're doing your thing musically,
right?
But then there came a time when you and Paul decided to form Fusion, off of Ephesians 6:10 through 17.
Right.
But when did your journey with Christ begin?
Okay, it's very interesting. So I went to Adventist school, and obviously there was a required Bible class. We had required chapel every day. And my parents were not, I don't want to say they were not Christians, because my dad was a very good moral man, but he was not a man of, I think he grew up Presbyterian and stuff. And my mom was scholarshiped in with the Adventists, had a very warm, fuzzy, but my parents weren't Christians per se. But my mom thought I would have a good education in Adventist school because she had a good experience being, my mom was an orphan, and she got, scholarshiped in. So I'm there going to Adventist school, hearing the gospel. Now, the Adventists respectfully have got some intense doctrine
Sure.
but I was hearing the gospel. And even though it wasn't resonating, so after I got out of high school, and in high school I got into everything it's funny, growing up in Southern California in the late 70s, everything you've heard is true. So, and even though I went to Adventist school, and a lot of my friends came from good Adventist families, we got into sex and drugs and rock and roll because that's what was going on. So ironically, I got out of high school, was playing in a bunch of bands, and then my sister lived in France. She had married a guy. He was actually Russian. He was a professor at the Sorbonne in Paris. and he got me swung in. So he got me swung in to the Sorbonne because trust me, I did not have the grades. Anyway, so I'm 20. I had a chance to go there. It was really good because I was kind of in a bad space, doing a lot of drugs and stuff. So it was this great fresh air. So I got to Paris, not speaking a lick of French. Somebody had given me a copy of the Bible, the Living Bible of translation, and I would go to this Parc Monceau in Paris, in the 17th district, and I'd start to read the Bible, and I started to have this kind of renaissance, like, I think there's something here. It just meant a lot to me. So let me take a step back. So Paul and I, he's playing in debut. I'm playing in No Surprise. The last time I'd seen him, there was this party. There was this Coke dealer. She was this very flamboyant lady. She was like 35 and we're like 18. And she liked hanging out with young musicians. And she would have parties at her house and Paul's band would play and No Surprise would play. So we got to know each other. So one night I'm at a party at her house and there's all this bacchanalia and debauchery going on. And Paul and I just had a beer and started talking about music. And he was telling me about how much he loved Kiss and Angel and all these theatrical bands. And we had this great 3-hour musical conversation. I'm sure we drank one beer in 3 hours because we were talking. Anyway, we said, bro, we got to stay in touch. Yeah. And we gave each other's phone numbers. And of course, like true musicians, we didn't stay in touch. But I went to France. So when I came back home, and at that point, I felt like I was a Christian when I came home. I felt like, okay, this is what I want to do. But I didn't know anything about it. And there was this paper in Southern California called the Recycler. It was kind of like a want ads paper back then. People would sell cars or whatever, but musicians would, bands. So I was working at Fullerton Music in Fullerton, California, which is one of the first Fender dealers. Came back, got a job there. It was incredible because it's a famous music store. So I'm doing that. Young Christian trying to figure out what's going on, not going to church, just reading the Bible. Opened up the recycler, saw this ad that said, high energy, heavy theatrical, a Christian band seeks dynamic bassist. So I called the ad and it was Paul. And we're going, dude, no way. No way. We both become Christians. And he goes, oh, remember Steve Martinez, who was the drummer in debut? He became a Christian. We got this band together. Right now, it's just me and Steve. So this is like 82. This is like November of 82. I just gotten back from France in June because, my mom had gotten cancer. I would have stayed in France. She said, hey, I've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Please come home. So I came home in June and then she passed away Thanksgiving Day in 1982, which obviously had a huge impact on me. That had a huge spiritual thing and searching and stuff. So we formed the band. It was just Paul, Steve Martinez, and myself. Paul had the full concept for the Armor. He had that whole thing going, and that's where it kind of kicked off. And then he and Steve had kind of been, I don't want to say floundering, but he didn't really have a partner. Steve was a great guy, but he wasn't a business guy at all. So when Paul and I got together, we were able to get a rehearsal warehouse. He finally had a guy who could, so we got a rehearsal warehouse together and started working on the band. The original guitar player was a guy named Gene Thurston. Gene was a great guy. He came to the band. He had this song called Step to the Light, which was a great song, which ended up becoming One of a Kind off First Watch. it changed, lyrics changed and all that. Gene's lyrics were actually way more Christian. One of a Kind, we kind of got a little watered down. It's a great song, but Gene wrote that, and then Gene left. Steve Martinez left. Musicians, it just happens in bands. So, and then we got Rikk Hart, 84. Rikk Hart is the guy who turned us on to Stryper. We had not heard of Stryper. I knew Rock's Regime and stuff, but I didn't know what was going on. It was all new to me. So Rick comes on to audition, and he said, "Have you guys heard Stryper?" We're going, "No." And he goes, "Oh, they used to be called Rock's Regime." I go, "I remember Rock's Regime. Yeah, the yellow and black. Back when Robert had this. He was Robbie O'Sweet, and I remember that." But he played me that first Stryper demo, and our jaws just dropped. Like, oh my gosh, this is it. Because we'd seen some Christian bands, and it was great, but it didn't rock hard enough for us. And we heard Stryper, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is legit. So we started to go see Stryper and all that, and that really inspired us. Like, hey, we got to get our act together. And so we made that Fusion demo tape in 84 after Rick joined. And then a friend of ours, actually, it was a friend of Rick's, who Rick went to high school with, a guy named Eric Blair.
Blaring out.
Yeah, blaring out, exactly. Eric Blair, blaring out, exactly. And he's always been blaring out, but this is before that. He worked in the Stryper crew. At that time, Stryper was blowing up. So they had this huge crew of guys, and I don't know exactly what Eric did. Long story short, he was a friend of Rick's. He heard our demo. Wes Hine, the president of Enigma Records, would go out and visit Stryper on the weekends, go out on the bus with him and stuff. Anyway, one night on the bus, Eric cornered Wes and said, and Eric talks like this, man. He talks like this. He goes, "Wes, you got to check out my friend's band, Guardian. These guys are great, man. I'm not saying, they're as good as Stryper, but they're good." And so he finally, Wes goes, "Okay, fine. Give me the tape. Give me the tape and leave me alone." But he listened to the tape, and about 2 weeks later, somehow his people called us and said, "Hey, Wes would like to come down next Tuesday night and visit you at your rehearsal studio." And at this time, it's just Paul, Rick, and myself. So Wes comes down, and it's just us in our studio. And he goes, "Hey, man, Eric gave me the tape. I really like the tape. Would you guys mind just playing me a few songs off the tape?" And so we started to play, and we're going. And after about 3 songs, he kind of stopped us. He said, "No, man, that's good. I just wanted to be sure that you guys were the same band that was on the tape." He goes, "I really like what you're doing, the whole prog rock thing. I think it's really interesting. We want to offer you a record deal." And we're like, "No way." We're like, I remember that moment, Paul, Rick, and myself looking at each other, and Wes is standing there. We're just going, this is not happening. And he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give me about 2 weeks." And he told us, "Think about a new name. Give me about 2 weeks. Get a lawyer. I'll send you a contract." And the Odyssey began. And again, so we signed with Enigma. And then anyway, James Isham had been in the band. James left just before we made the demo. Great guitar player, very Andy Summers, Police, like very textural, great guitar player, but he left the band too. So we signed, it was Paul, Rick, and myself, but then we got David Caro. And by the time the actual contract was ready, David Caro signed the deal with us. So it was the 4 of us who signed the actual deal with Enigma. And this is like September of 85. Well, as people know, so Wes had us in development. He knew in retrospect, he didn't tell us this, that we weren't ready. He liked what we were doing. So he would bring us in the studio now and then and pay for some demos and stuff. And he would have some of the Enigma staff producers and stuff and they'd say, "Hey, these guys are getting better." So he kind of had us in development. Well, obviously, and then Tony Palacios joined David Carr left. Great guy. Loved the guy. He had to move because of a job. He moved like an hour and a half away. Like he was way out in like Apple Valley, California. He goes, "Guys, I'm not going to be able to come to practice that much." And Paul and I are like, "Oh, we love David. It's great." But Rick's like, "Bro, this is not going to happen. I love David too." So unbeknownst to us, Rick put out an ad in the Recycler on his own, and Tony answered it.
From sea to shining sea, the tide is high and everyone's running.
So one night I get to practice, and this guy shows up, this tall, dark, handsome guy, and he walks in, and Paul and I are looking at him like, "What's up, bro?" He goes, "Yeah, Rick invited me down. Did you guys not know I was coming to audition?" And we're like, "No, bro, we did not know that." And anyway, he plugged in and started to play, and he was this incredible player. And we're like, Paul and I are actually thinking, "Dude, you're incredible. You're almost too good for us. Like, are you sure you want to do this? You know, we wear the armor and this kind of stuff." And he goes, "I talked to Rick." Because he was kind of known in the Orange County Christian scene. People knew Tony. I think his band was called the Ascenders. They were kind of like a Christian Duran Duran, and his brother was in it. Anyway, he goes, "I feel like God," and maybe it's because we were a signed band, but he felt like, "Hey man, I feel like I'm supposed to at least give it a shot with you guys." So this is '86. So we started slugging it out in LA, building a following on the circuit. That's what, Wes said. You need to build a following, keep chugging away, chugging away, chugging away. And then probably about '87, we got a new manager, Sharon Shubin. God bless you, Sharon, or wherever you are. She said, "Guys," and this is a turning point. She goes, "The armor's cool, but it was not happening in the LA club scene at the time. We would get routinely laughed at. Like, what the heck? We'd play on these shows and people go, 'You guys are a good band, but what the heck?'" Anyway, she was actually a costume designer. She was affiliated with Stryper as well. She designed us these really cool costumes. We dropped the armor. We went with the U. Things were falling into place. And then finally in '88, Oz Fox, we've been talking to Oz forever about producing, finally went in the studio with Oz in '88, cut the record really quick. It wasn't a huge budget. Ironically, Oz got us studio time at the famous Sound City recording studio out in the valley with that famous Neve console that Dave Grohl owns, or when it was still there. But Oz got us a deal where we could record at 11 at night till 7 in the morning, the actual old graveyard shift. So we went there and made our record, cut a lot of stuff at Oz's old little home studio, turned the record in 1988. Wes said, "Hey, I like it, but I'm not going to release it yet. You guys need to get management." So anyway, he introduced us to these legit LA managers. Anyway, we built it and built it and built it. Finally, June of '89, First Watch comes out. So anyway, hopefully,
but
yeah. Go
David,
ahead.
I'm kind of curious. I'm just going to back up a couple years. So, was Wes instrumental in getting you guys on the California Metal compilation? Because that's where I really found out
Right,
about you guys, and
right.
those two songs are
Right.
incredible.
Thanks. Actually, not. That was because the whole sanctuary thing was going on, and it was a wonderful time. Bob Beeman just did a fantastic job of creating this place of fellowship for all the Christian bands. And Southern California is a vast area.
Mhm.
So we would all go and he would have these events. Bob was the California metal guy. This guy who owned Regency Records, I can't think of his name, David Malmy, I think. He went to John and Dino Elefante and said, "Hey, I want to do this. I want to do some kind of compilation. I see what's going on in the LA Christian metal scene." And John and Dino said, "Hey, this pastor, Bob Beeman, he knows all the bands." So it was kind of John and Dino, and they were kind of like, John and Dino produced. Bob was kind of the executive producer. He handpicked the bands. And that's how that happened. And then Wes said, "Yeah, absolutely." At first, well, we got a record contract. I don't know if we could do it. Wes is going, "Absolutely." That was like, he's going, "This is great. I
Well,
let
and
this
that
man."
probably just gave you even more
Exactly.
publicity for the
He didn't have to
band.
spend any money, and it was doing what he wanted us, to
Mhm.
do.
Yep.
Following. So anyway, in hindsight, Wes was absolutely right. We needed to keep building. First watch finally came out. We turned it in June of '88. It wasn't released until June of '89. And then we hit the road. Our first US tour, we'd only played like in California before, but we'd gotten to where we were playing all up and down the state of California. So first watch, all of a sudden that comes out, and it was, at that time there was a distribution on Capitol. So it was an international release. Now, we didn't get like a huge push like Striper did, but our record was out. We started playing, went on the road. It was, 8 guys in a van in a trailer, and went out and did it. And then unfortunately, Rikk Hart, there was some things going on in his life. Long story short, 3 months into our first tour, everything we'd worked for, Rick left the band. He had some personal issues. He said, I can't be on the road. I know this is, we all felt terrible. Nobody wanted Rick to leave. I loved Rick. He was a great drummer, great showman. Anyway, he left. And then Paul, about, 2 months later, he had some things going on in his life, and that was a little bit more complicated. And I'll let him tell that story if he wants. I'm not gonna get into that. He left the band. So we'd known Carl Ney. Paul was still in the band when Carl joined. We actually got a guy. We had a tour of Japan. Got a guy named Jason Souza played. He played with our friend Jimmy Arsenault's band Soldier up in the Bay Area. So he came and did that tour with us, and we thought he was going to join. Then he got the offer to join this Scream with John Corabi and Juan Alderete from Racer X, and I get it. He took the gig. So we had known Carl Ney. We had just known him from the Christian scene, and we liked him. We said, oh, Carl's a good guy. So Carl ended up joining the band. Paul was still our singer, and then Paul suddenly leaves. And then Tony and I are like, at that time we're feeling like, okay, we're not a priority at Enigma. We appreciate everything Wes has done for us. But if you're not, there's how label politics work. There are bands that get the push. Other ones are in development. And anyway, we were still kind of a development band. Tony and I kind of thought to ourselves, okay, A, we're not getting a push at Enigma. B, should we be on a Christian label? Because at this time, John and Dino said, hey, we just cut a deal with Burr Records. They had Pachyderm Studios. We're going to do Pachyderm Records. Would you guys be interested in signing? It's just going to be a production deal. So we said, sure. So Tony and I went to Enigma, very polite, and they were great. I said, guys, we appreciate everything you've done. Can we be released? They may have been relieved. I don't know, because, they still technically owed us a second record, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, parted ways amicably, signed with John and Dino. Then the great singer hunt, ensued. Auditioned a bunch of guys. In fact, our friend, people don't know this, our friend Jimmy Arsenault of Soldier was basically in the band. He was a guy like Paul who could play guitar and sing, and it was perfect. And then we got this demo tape from Jamie Rowe in the mail. And Tony and Jamie had met each other. Jamie was a fan. He reached out to Tony, and so he knew him. And I guess Jamie called and said, hey, I heard Paul left. Can I send a tape? And Jamie and Tony was kind of like, I heard Tempest and I thought it was okay. And he goes, okay, bro, send me a tape. But he didn't have his hopes up. Jamie sent us this tape, and it was just pretty much him scatting melodically, just doing his big voice and anyway, and he's singing. And then he had this very rudimentary version of this acoustic ballad, which became Oh Never Say Goodbye. But he had it 3/4 of the way finished, and we helped him finish once. So anyway, he sent us that demo, and we played it with John and Dino. And John, who's a great singer, goes, this guy can sing. Dino and I will pay for a plane ticket, get him out here. And so Jamie gets off the plane, and he's this big 6'4" redheaded country boy. At the time, he had short hair, did not look the part. At that time, Tony and I all had our groovy lion's mane hair. So he gets off the plane, and we take him down to our rehearsal studio, and we start jamming with him. And Tony goes, hey, I'm going to play this riff. He played this riff. It was Power of Love. Jamie started just singing, freestyling what became the chorus. And we're going, okay, this is really interesting. Like, this feels really good. It feels really good. But, he didn't look the part. And finally, John and Dino go, they said to us, okay, guys, is this big redheaded galoot going to be in the band? And we said, we think so. He goes, well, we just want to let you know, John and I fully back it. The guy can sing his butt off. Let's do it. So Jamie joined the band, and we went right in the studio right away and started cutting Fire and Love.
You get Jamie Rowe, and then 1 week later, we get this great album, Fire
Right.
and Love.
Right.
So Jamie, I did not know. Jamie told me that was a wig he was wearing for the cover.
Yeah.
That was a wig. That was a wig. The rest of us, that was our real hair. And we knew, bro, your hair's gonna grow. But it was like everything was like, we got to do a photo shoot next week. So yeah, we went down to a wig store, got a redheaded wig, and eventually he grew his hair out like that. But yes, you're right. That was a wig.
So let me ask you, David, and I'm looking at our time, and we got about 30 more minutes, but I want to ask. So you
we
made
can do a part
mention,
2 if you guys want later, or whatever you want to do.
we made mention of Guardian. You talked about how Guardian went from Enigma to Pachyderm.
Right.
What prompted then the stylistic change from the melodic metal of First Watch?
Right.
And I just want to make mention really quick, Angelic Warlord, Andrew Rockwell over there.
Right.
This album was rated top 5 it was ranked in the top 5 placing out of the 50 greatest 80s metal albums. So
Wow.
kudos to First Watch, but we
Yeah.
also get these brilliant albums.
Right.
My
Okay.
question here,
Right,
David,
right.
is what prompted the stylistic change from the melodic metal of First Watch to the more
Right.
bluesy metal of these?
Well, a lot of that, like for the most part, First Watch was written by Paul and Tony, and Paul has his unique stuff. Paul had been the primary songwriter before Tony joined, and then Tony came in. So we had that sound, and when Jamie joined, he has that big bluesy rock voice, and Tony and I were Zeppelin fanatics. And then I started to write a lot more with the guys. So our palette started to kind of expand, and it just kind of happened naturally. Jamie was this great bluesy singer. And so I started, to get in there because I love that stuff, and started to kind of insert my influence. So the sound kind of morphed naturally, and Fire and Love. And then again, it kept morphing. We went out and toured on Fire and Love like nonstop for like 2 years. Just the band kind of blew up. It was amazing to be a part of it. We kept getting dates. Anyway, we started writing our next record. It was more and more all the influences. Like, I'm a huge Rolling Stones fan. Tony and I love Led Zeppelin, Van Halen. Carl's got his influences. So the band's sound started to kind of blossom in kind of in Led Zeppelin style. We always, how Zeppelin covered so much ground musically, ballads, heavy songs, stuff like that. So the band started to grow. So Miracle Mile was kind of a continued offshoot of that whole. All of us at that point, all 4 guys in the band, were writing. Jamie, Tony, Carl, and myself. We would write in different incarnations. Sometimes Jamie and I would write together. Sometimes this and that. I mean, Tony's the most prolific of all of us because he's such an insane musician. But we all 4 contributed. Like, Tony would write all the big riff songs, and then I'd bring in a song like Sweet Mystery and The Captain, which I wrote with some guys in high school at Adventist school, which is a trip. And Carl brought in Do You Know What Love Is, which he'd written on the piano. And then it wasn't like they were finished songs. We would beat them up together as a band, but the sound started to kind of widen, so to speak.
Let your love roll on, let it roll. Things you've given to me, may I never let them go. Let your love roll on, let it roll. Keep that river flowing, give the power in my soul, yeah. Oh, give the power in my soul, yeah.
David, you mentioned The Captain, and I absolutely love that song from Miracle Mile, and it's an acoustic number.
Right.
I want to ask before, our time does run out here and I reach the end of an endless summer, a song that you also wrote for this
Man,
great album,
right,
Swing, Swing, Swung. I've got
right.
I got a couple questions about this.
Sure, sure.
Some did not know at the time in 1994 what to make of this album, but I want to
Right.
make mention Mark Allen Powell, who wrote the book Encyclopedia of Contemporary Christian Music. He stated, and I quote, about this album, remains one of the best Christian records ever made.
Wow.
And so that says a lot. Now,
Wow.
David, by 1994, grunge had made a big splash.
Right.
And, that genre plus alt rock were in full swing. No pun intended with the swing, swing, swung here, but was Guardian at this juncture. Now, I really did enjoy this album.
Right.
And I was just thinking, okay, because at that time, a lot of metal artists would do the unplugged performances.
Right.
David, a little more of a candid question here. When grunge was in full swing in 94, were you guys sidestepping the grunge movement at this juncture by perhaps taking the rock band going unplugged mode, or what was going on here exactly?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. So what really happened was we had originally been on the road so long with Fire and Love, we were talking about, because we would do acoustic stuff. Like occasionally we'd play like small youth groups and we would play acoustically. And Jamie had this idea because the label is going, we need a new record. You guys are hot. Jamie goes, what if we did like an EP of acoustic songs instead of Fire and Love, call it Wire and Wood? We're like, great idea. Let's do that. And the label was into it. Anyway, things started happening. We rolled into Miracle Mile. Miracle Mile came out. We all moved to Nashville. And John and Dino at that point were looking at maybe selling Pachyderm Records because they were building the Sound Kitchen studios in Nashville. They had a lot going on. Those guys are super successful guys, had a lot going on. So at that time, they kind of sold our contract, to Myrrh Records, and Myrrh was more of the mainstream contemporary CCM thing. So it was kind of perfect timing. So we made this. So in our mind, and for Tony and I, we were making Zeppelin 3, which is Zeppelin's acoustic record. So we're like, yeah, this is great. We're going to do Zeppelin 3. The new label wants maybe more poppier stuff. We can still be a rock band. So it all kind of came together. And we cut that album mostly in John Elefante's garage. The brothers had just moved out from California. Sound Kitchen was not finished. We cut it in John's garage. It was very organic by nature, but it was a great introduction for us to the whole Nashville Christian music scene, which was not like the LA rock scene at all. Mm-hmm. So it was good timing. The Myrrh Records said, hey, we got something that we can work. We can start taking you guys to pop radio. You got some ballads on here. So it was great timing. But in our mind, it was just going to be Zeppelin 3. We weren't trying to go pop. We weren't even really thinking about the whole grunge thing or anything like that. That really didn't come up until we did our next record, Buzz. So anyway, we did Swing, Swang, Swung, went out on tour with Steve Taylor. Great tour. Got to be good friends with Steve. And at that time, we were still friends with John and Dino, but they'd sold our contract. They're building their studio. And we thought, maybe it's time for us to try something fresh. Well, Steve had just produced The Newsboys. Good success with that. And so we're on tour with him. We shared a bus with him. So one night, we cornered him on the bus and said, Steve, what would you think about producing us? And he goes, I'm not really a hard rock guy, but I like your band. I like you guys. Let's think about it. Long story short, we went to the label and they said, that's great. So we recorded Buzz. And it was great because at that time we were we were in good shape as players. We'd been playing, Carl, Jamie, Tony, and myself had been touring now hardcore for many years. So we had we were very seasoned, played well together. So that album came together very quickly. Whole different style. John and Dino had their production style, everything layered and stuff. And it was great, but they had their stuff. But Steve brought us in the studio and pretty much put us in a big room and cut us old school Glenn Johns style, like live.
I've reached the end of an endless summer, yeah. I just woke up, oh yeah, from a crazy dream. I'm getting up with my eyes wide open, yeah.
I thought Wire and Wood. I remember reading an article and I thought that was the perfect title. Why?
It
Why
was.
not Wire and Wood? And why? And Swing, Swang, Swang's okay, but
Okay, well, it's okay. So I'll tell you why. So Wire and Wood, it was going to be, and we had a bunch of different songs. But then when we all moved to Nashville, we're waiting for John and Dino. We were in this kind of this weird period. We moved to Nashville. We were all broke, except Tony, who'd gotten offered the gig. He didn't want to move to California. He didn't want to move to Nashville. Of all guys who did not want to move, it was Tony. And then God, in his God way, Tony got a call from Michael W. Smith. Hey, man, I want to get a rock guitar player for this tour. I'm going to pay you 10 grand a month. It kind of solved Tony's moving anxiety. So we all came out here, but we were in this transition. So I would go to Tony's. He had a rental house. We lived on all different parts, different sides of town. And Tony and I started writing together. And we had all these songs. And it's funny, it all came together. And it was this hot mix of stuff. If you listen to Swing, Swang, Swung, it's all over the map. And then Wire and Wood, we met with the actual record company. And they said, Wire and Wood's cool, but it doesn't really fit us. And I said, I've got a title. I got a title. Swing, Swang, Swung. That was me. I'm not trying to brag, but that was my title because he was such this weird thing. And they go, you know what? We like it. Let's do it. They sent us down to New Orleans to do a photo shoot. All those photos were done in New Orleans. It was a great time because finally, John and Dino did a great job, but it was still, things were done on a budget because they were a small indie label. So all of a sudden we're signed to, Murr, and Murr's like going, hey, we're going to spend money on you guys now. So Swing, Swang, Swung came out. There was a lot more things that were accessible to Christian pop radio. We still had our integrity with our fans because when you saw us live, we still played stuff across all the albums. So that was a great kind of a transitional record, very good for our relationship, with our label. And then it segued into Steve Taylor and Buzz, which again, whole different sound.
Well, I got a question about Buzz, and I think I might know the answer, David, but I want to ask you, who came up with all the different
Covers. That was me. I was kind of, at the time, I had a background in graphic design. I got into graphic design kind of early.
of Buzz? Was that, I thought that was you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we had this concept for Buzz, and I had this idea. Let's do four different record covers. Totally copying Zeppelin, In Through the Outdoor. Totally ripping off my heroes. Totally shamelessly, but it's in loving tribute. So came up with those four covers. Obviously, there's the one cover with the bees, the one cover with the little girls whispering, the one cover with the famous astronaut Buzz Aldrin, and the other picture, that's my older brother Bruce, and my mom's cutting his hair and he's picking his nose on a military base in the 40s. So yeah, and the record company went along with it. They're going, this is very adventurous. And so yeah, so that's how that came about. The Buzz record is probably my favorite record. And I'll tell you why, because we were gelling so well together as a band. It was not hard to make. It happened quick. And it was finally a record that the four of us all played. And not that we ever minded having guest musicians and stuff, but Steve Taylor was living out his English rock producer fantasy, doing the full Glyn Johns thing, having us in a big room, bunch of room mics on Carl's kit. Anyway, so sorry,
No,
I'm
no.
not sure to answer your question.
Yeah, that did. No, thank you.
I'm over time, gotta shake away the notion that I'm controlled by fate. I'll take a chance, take me away. Ain't never seen the man I'm supposed to be. Been everybody, but ain't been me.
Regarding Buzz and Bottle Rocket, they were different than the metal of Guardian.
Right.
I don't know if you'd call this grunge or post grunge or
Yeah, right.
alt rock,
Right.
whatever. But
Right.
here's my question, David, and yourself, as somebody who knows their way around the recording studio and the business. One day we got to get into your graphic design stuff, but what are your thoughts on the shifting waters of modern music, modern being the operative and flexible word for its respective time? Here's what I mean. As fans, what should we allow the artist? How much flexibility should we as fans allow the artist with their craft and with the artist, David?
Right.
Guardian had done melodic metal and then kind of more of a bluesy metal.
Mhm.
How much flexibility should the artist expect their fans to allow them?
Great question. Great question. Because we would get some of our fans would push back, and even guys in the industry, like guys like even like a guy like who we respect, like Bob Hartman of Petra. He would say, guys, you guys are changing gears a lot. There's a lot to be said for you get your sound and you stick with your sound and you get that going. We were kind of schizophrenic as a band because the four of us had such, Jamie Rose, 10 years younger than the rest of the guys. So he grew up on Cheap Trick. So we always had this musical schizophrenia going on in the band. And it happened organically. Like Buzz at that point, we were really influenced by everything that was going on in music. We're music fans too. So we didn't say, hey, we're going to jump on the grunge bandwagon. We loved all those bands. Like we loved Stone Temple Pilots, which ironically, Rikk Hart in the early days worked with Dean DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots. And I remember meeting Dean and Robert when they were just coming up, just in passing. Anyway, so all that stuff happened organically. The only thing that was not organic was, even though Buzz sold well, I think it sold like 60,000 records and it sold well. We were, bands have this thing where, you climb and you climb and you climb, you hit a peak, and a lot of times you plateau and then you start to dip for whatever reason. So I want to say really quick. I want to say First Watch sold 30,000 records. And then Fire and Love sold 50,000 records. Well, Miracle Mile blew up and sold 110,000 records. But then Buzz only sold about 60,000 records. So the label, which is what labels do, go, yeah. So there was a lot of pressure on us on Bottle Rocket. A lot more A&R pressure. We had generally always been left alone. Yeah, so there was a lot of pressure on us to conform to what was going on. In retrospect, it's my least favorite record, and not that I don't like it musically, but there was a lot of turbulence. I had some things going on in my life. I had the most kids at that time. Now we have 18 kids between the four guys in the band, but I started having kids first. My oldest son was like in 8th grade, starting to have problems in school, stuff that boys go through. Nothing bad, but I was thinking, man, am I supposed to be on the road? I got a family, so I'm thinking about leaving the band. The record company's putting a lot of pressure on us. I still love Bottle Rocket. I still love it. Actually, those are my favorite bass tones. We got to explore a bunch of different bass sounds. So again, and Steve Taylor wrote heavily on that, and that was great. None of that, but it was kind of like I knew at that point I was going to leave the band. And not because I didn't love it. I just felt like God was saying, you need to take care of your family first. whole Latin American thing in Buzz, we had this great A&R guy at Murr, Mark Maxwell. He said, "Hey, we just signed on with the Spanish distributor. What would you think about taking, because that's more of a conservative pop market. What would you guys think about taking a bunch of the Guardian ballads across a couple records, getting Jamie with a Spanish vocal coach and doing a Spanish record?" And Tony and I, who grew up in Southern California around that, were like, yeah, why not? So we did that. They picked out a handful of ballads. Jamie got with a Spanish vocal coach. Anyway, and we did the first Spanish record. We had no idea what was going to happen. We're like more like, oh, this is fun. Oh, what the heck? And then we started to get dates. And so at this time, we're playing 500 seaters in the States. I remember our first gig in Costa Rica. We go down there and they take us to the venue, and it's like a 5,000 seat hall. And we're going, what the heck? Who's headlining? And the guy goes, "You're headlining." We're going, what? So anyway, and then Jamie, that night, he had his notes, his Spanish notes, and we sang, I think he sang "See You in Heaven" and "Never Say Goodbye" in Spanish. And the crowd sang along with every word in Spanish. Wow. And we're like, oh, whoa, something's going on here. Anyway, we had this whole separate reality in Latin America where we're playing to like 10 times the people that were playing. That it was just this amazing thing that God did and used us, because there was this real heavy evangelism going on there in Latin America. And we would just be the band that they would bring in. They'd have these big youth rallies. It was amazing. That's my favorite part of Guardian, our whole Latin American, experience. It was just unbelievable. I mean, great time everywhere, great time in the States, great time in Europe, Japan, blah, blah, blah. But the whole Latin American thing, because you got to understand, we're like, four long-haired white dudes who don't speak Spanish, who God used, got Jamie with a vocal coach. As it turns out, apparently he sings Spanish beautifully. Apparently, when he's coached, it was without a really ugly American accent. It was like, anyway, so we had that whole odyssey going on. It was just something that, to this day. And there are stories that at some point, if we do a part 2, I can tell you some stories about Latin America that were just unbelievable.
Just want to say thank you and to all in Guardian for ministering to Rex and I. Like Rex mentioned, California Metal. That's when I first heard Guardian in '87. But
look at the cover. Who do you think that is on the cover? Who do you think?
I've wondered about that.
That's David Bach.
That's me, bro. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it until I saw the cover. I'm going, okay.
I wish I would. I have that CD.
And I'm not bragging. I'm not, but I'm just saying, I'm going, okay, that's me in the armor. It was cool.
I've wondered that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I asked David Malmy once. He goes, yeah, well, we saw a picture of you guys and I gave it to my illustrator. It wasn't like we picked you and did that, but he saw that and they thought, oh, that's kind of cool. The armor and the long blonde hair. And anyway.
Well, if that's you, I've got to ask you about your knees.
That's my claim to fame.
Rex, take us the message from home and then we'll talk to David just a minute off air.
Sure. Well, David, we always close out our program with a scripture verse. I know you know that you've watched our program, and I try to pick something to do with the band or the band's name, and the scripture I've selected is Galatians chapter 3 verse 24, and it goes well with the band's name Guardian, of course. And the scripture reads, "So the law was our guardian until Christ came, that we might be justified by faith." And I know you also was talking about Ephesians chapter 6 and the armor of God and that. So, that's another scripture that goes well with the name Guardian. And I just want to thank you and all the band members, past and present, who've been in Guardian and been kind of like our youth ministers growing up. And we just love and appreciate you all. And we just want to thank you again for your time, David. So thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. Both you guys. You know what? It's my honor. I mean, again, when I talk to all the guys now, especially when Jamie, Tony, Carl, and myself will get together, we just marvel that God used us, that God just used 4 goofballs. And, so anyway, thank you. Great scripture. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you, David, and we'll sign off to all of our friends and take care, everybody. And we'll have David back for a part 2 sometime.
Oh, all
Thanks
right,
again,
guys.
David.
Thanks.
Stick around.
Peace.
My last question, David, and then we'll head to message from home here in a minute. Regarding
Bro, you got 15 minutes, man. Are you trying to get rid of me?
No.
I want to ask you a question off air, David, since you said you're an open book.
So
Ask me on air.
Ask
Dude,
them. I wanna ask
dude,
the woman
leave it
outside.
in. Leave it in.
no.
No,
I'm editing
no.
this out.
No, people, that's just what, because I'm a fan. I love it when I see like interviews with artists I love and there's warts in there. Anyway,